Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us in today's very special edition of It's a Peer-to-Peer World Virtual Conference. My name is Nuti. I'm Editor-in-Chief and Content Director of Nonprofit Pro, and I am delighted to join you as the MC for today's conference. This conference is brought to you by 5 companies that serve nonprofits. They've come together to share their unique experience and knowledge with you today. The companies are Accelerus, Cathexis Partners, Charity Dynamics, Maureen Walbioff, and OMatic. And just so you have some background for today, the Peer-to-Peer World Virtual Conference is typically held each year in the fall. But we're bringing you this special edition today to provide you with practical tips for virtual events and campaigns that you can start using right away during this time when in-person fundraising events aren't an option. We've had more than 1,800 unique RSVPs for today's conference, so it's pretty clear that our sessions today are very much needed during this time in our sector. And please note that if you did not register for one of the sessions available today and you'd like to attend, visit peertopeerworld.com and register for the session. After you register, you'll receive a unique link to attend the session. So the title of this session is Step Up Your Virtual Peer-to-Peer Campaign Results, Turning Social Donors into Long-Term Donors. And during the session, please feel free to submit any questions you may have through the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel. The speakers will answer questions toward the end of the session. And please note that this session will be recorded and made available online after today's conference. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Stu.
Thank you very much. My name is Stu Manowith with OMatic Software, and Bailey, my co-presenter, and I will introduce ourselves in just a minute. But we thought that we would just start with throwing out a couple of statistics. We work with a lot of databases at OMatic, a lot of different nonprofit organizations' databases. We've got about 2,700 nonprofits that are our clients. And this was not done. I will be fully transparent and say this was not a scientific study. We really just took a look at some random databases that we had access to. But what we found was 8% of annual donors are first-time event participants for organizations that run events, and 6% of annual donors are first-time tribute donors for organizations that have tribute programs. And those are not staggering numbers. They're relatively small. Of course, if you've got a big database, that could be a lot of individual contributors, but they're not huge numbers. On the other hand, they're not minuscule either. 8%, 6% of your annual donors is a significant number of donors that you would want to retain. The point here is that we want to retain these donors for as long-term as possible. And we're going to talk obviously more throughout the next hour about how to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. So just to sort of set the agenda and what we want to cover today, some of the key concepts that we'd like to go through include, just first of all, let's take a step back and let's talk about what are social donors. Let's define them so we all have a like understanding, and let's talk about what motivates them as well. The next thing we want to talk to is why is this specific subset of donors so hard to retain? And then finally, what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit forward thinking about some strategies and some fundraising techniques that we can use to re-engage these social donors. This will ensure that you can make sure that you've got the full picture of these supporters from start to finish. But as Stu said, we should probably introduce ourselves first. so you know who is talking
ladies
to you.
First, please.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Stu. Thank you. So that said, I am the one on your left. My name is Bailey Bensley, and at OMatic, I'm the Director of Sales Enablement. My background, kind of what led me to this point in my career, I spent 7 years at a nonprofit. So I've been in your shoes. I spent 8 years at Blackbaud, so I've kind of got that side of the coin covered. And now my role at OMatic, which I've been doing for about 4.5 years, is really kind of a hybrid of both. So my role is to work with you, the nonprofit, to really make sure we're understanding what your needs are, what your goals are. Because at the end of the day, if you're evaluating a piece of software to try to make your life easier, that's great. But does it actually help you get to your goal? So that's my job here, and I have the amazing pleasure of working with Stu.
Thank you very much, Bailey. It's ironic that Bailey's background and mine have a lot in common, to the point that we started at OMatic within a month of each other about 4.5 years ago. I also worked at Blackbaud for 13 years before that in professional services, implementing Blackbaud fundraising and financial management solutions at nonprofit Blackbaud customers. And then before that, I actually worked at two nonprofit organizations in the Midwest. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I worked in annual giving roles at two nonprofits. And ironically, I was thinking about it when we were preparing for this. Back in the day when I started my career, annual giving meant primarily direct mail and telephone programs. And today, of course, it's very, very different. But we still had this issue of social donors. We did events, we did tribute programs, and it's been an aspect of fundraising that has followed me throughout my career.
So while yes, Stu and I love to brag on each other, the reason why we do an introduction of ourselves is just so you know our experience and why we are people that you should perhaps listen to, meaning we do have some exposure in this market. And so just like that, I'm not here to really, promote OMatic per se, but I want to be able to explain kind of our background just so you know who we are as a company. We've been around for a lot longer than people realize. We were founded in 2002. We've got, as Stu had mentioned prior, we've got over 2,700 clients worldwide. So we are international. And our team members, I think we have gone over 80 at this point.
I think we are actually over 80.
Yeah, and when Stu and I started, we were in mid-20s, I think. So we're growing quickly. And again, this is important for you guys to understand, just so you know that we've been here for a while. We are growing. We are solid. We're successful. The one thing that I would say that we all have in common throughout OMatic is we all have a passion for nonprofits. Every single person here, if you talk to them, has worked at a nonprofit, is currently on a board of a nonprofit, has volunteered at a nonprofit. That is absolutely the common denominator. So much so that we wanted to come up with our own mission statement. So the mission statement that OMatic really abides by is this.
Sorry.
Oh, yep, you can. It's okay. I'm excited too. So it's to empower your organization to deliver the right message at the right time to the right supporter. And the way we do that is by connecting all of the valuable data that you have to ultimately strengthen the relationships, because those relationships are the backbone of your organization. That is what is fueling your mission and therefore allowing you to achieve your goals. So that's what we're looking to do on a daily basis through all of our products and solutions and thought leadership. And, don't take it from us. There's a lot of quotes. In fact, we always implore our clients, our prospective clients, to Google us, because we have a great reputation. I think we have the absolute best clients in the world. I love this quote from Angela from Canadian Cancer Society of Ontario. But again, we really are here for the nonprofit, and I believe that shows.
Great. Thank you. That was a terrific introduction. So let's move into let's just move into defining. So just what are social donors? Social donors. Wait, sorry. Oh, there we go. Social donors are organizational contributors that were brought into the organization by way of an existing social relationship. They generally don't have an initial affinity of their own with the organization, but are involved because of their existing relationship with a family member, a friend, a coworker, or someone who, in one way or another, enticed them to join the organization because of the relationship with that person, not because of passion or affinity with the organization itself. The main examples of this that we're going to discuss today, excuse me, special event participants, tribute donors, and especially peer-to-peer donors, which is really the main focus of this conference. Up until 2 months ago, I would not have divided that group up to, or those kind of donors into different categories of conventional peer-to-peer and virtual peer-to-peer, but in this world that we're living in, and really for the foreseeable future, we really have to take both types of donors into consideration. Donors that participated in conventional peer-to-peer events, as well as those who are now participating in virtual peer-to-peer events. And I've got a story about a virtual peer-to-peer event that I participated myself in toward the end of the presentation. One thing that I do want to caution everybody is that when we talk about social donors, we are not talking about social media donors. So we are not talking about people who are come on a Facebook page. Those could be social donors if one of their friends told them to go to Facebook and make a donation. But we're not talking about social media in the conventional term. We are talking about, we use the term social to define donors that came to your organization through social relationships with somebody already engaged with you. And I think we are ready actually for our first poll.
We are, yep. So you can see the poll has been launched. So feel free to enter your answer in. But what we are curious about, for those of you on the line, is which of the following does your organization do most? Is it mainly peer-to-peer events? Is it more ticketed events? Is it around tribute giving? Or is it sort of an even bag and it's really all of the above? So we'll give you guys just another 20 seconds or so to put in your answer, and then we'll see what everyone has to say. And with the number of attendees on this, we'll get some pretty good, I think this will be a much more scientific approach, Stu, than we've taken before.
Yes. But you know what? I'm looking at the poll numbers. I know we're going to give it another few seconds, but right now it looks as though the slight majority is doing all three types, which I'm really glad to hear. Of those that are not doing all of the above, peer-to-peer is most, ticket events is second, and tribute last. But the majority of people answered all of the above, which means they're doing all of these fundraising methods and fundraising activities that involve the whole gamut of social donors. So that's great, because I think that this presentation will really resonate. The poll is still going. Let's give it just another 10 seconds. Three, two, one. Okay, can we close the poll? Great.
All right. Okay. So yeah, it looks like the majority is all of the above, and second is definitely peer-to-peer events.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've sort of defined who these individuals are, it's important, again, as I always say, let's take a step back before we, move forward with how do we talk to these individuals. I think it's important to understand and really think about what motivates the social donor, because it's different. It is different than normal donors. The motivation to give for these individuals is going to be different. Primarily and initially,
there I go again. Sorry.
Again, I know it's exciting stuff, Stu. It's exciting stuff. But primarily and initially, the reason why these individuals are donating is it's not necessarily your mission. It's the relationship with someone else that has motivated the donor to commit to engaging. So you have to think about the fact that emotion often plays a role. It's that passion of the friend or the relative or the coworker who already has an affinity with the organization. That's what can be contagious. It might not just be passion, it might be guilt, but that's okay. It's not necessarily, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you think about when we say guilt, an example of that is, working with the individuals that we do that are so passionate about nonprofits. A lot of times Stu and I have our coworkers come to us and say, hey, this is something that's really, a big focus for me. We'd love to help you out. And, you want to be able to help everyone out. So that's okay. So just think about that fact that it is not a direct connection. It is typically through supporting an individual. So, with that said, they can't be treated the same as those that have necessarily this clear, organic relationship to the organization. The relationship is there, it's just different. So we just need to be cognizant of that and be able to treat them differently. Now, the challenge behind that, though, is typically when we talk about retention and retaining donors, we think about the fact that we're retaining them or they're retained because they have an allegiance to our mission. They have an affinity towards our mission. They understand what the impact can be over their giving. But with social donors, it's a little bit different because, again, the way that they came to us is typically through someone else. So they're quick to lapse oftentimes because, yes, they may be thanked by the social relationship that initially engaged them, but sometimes the organization itself is not thanking them. Again, there might be little to no stewardship. The communication, if they do receive it, can be very generic. And it's important to note that 25% of social donors never actually hear from the organization again after making the initial gift or registering. And it's so funny to think about. And I guess it's because we're always trying to prioritize of a big group of donors, let's go after the individuals that maybe we do have that direct connection. But think about how big the opportunity is with these social donors. We already have their attention. We've got their attention and we also have their data already. So not only do we have their information, we've got their attention, but we also know why they were motivated to engage. So this could really be a huge opportunity for us to take this population. And as Stu mentioned at the beginning, that's between 6 and 8% of the database, which is not insignificant. So let's take this opportunity and let's jump on it.
Absolutely,
So,
it could really be a gold mine if it's handled correctly. So I think that we've built in. Thank you, Bailey. I think that we've built in another poll, and so if we could run that poll, that would be great.
So
What
this
information?
one,
Yeah, go ahead.
What information do you collect on peer-to-peer registrants or attendees? Is it email only? Is it just name and email? Or it is name and email and general bio information and maybe some more information as well? And Stu, I'd be venturing to guess that as we are shifting to virtual events, this is probably shifting as well. Where before it might be just, email or name and email, where now that is primarily virtual, I'd be willing to bet that people are probably starting to think about collecting more information prior to engagement.
Yeah. All right, I'm watching the timer here.
No worries.
We'll keep it up in another 15 seconds.
So Stu and I typically, when we put these polls out, we try to guess, we try to make bets on what we think the answer is going to be. And Stu, I was going to ask you what your thoughts were, but I'm not going to since you're looking at the results coming in, and that would be cheating.
I am looking at the results coming in, so I won't tell you. We're at another 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blast off. Okay. So the majority are collecting a plethora of data, which is great. There is a considerable minority that are only collecting name and email, and I am glad to see that very few, if any, are only collecting email. And I know there are some platforms that will only provide email, and so in those cases there's not much choice. But obviously, our best practice is to collect as much data as possible.
But you're right, Stu. I'm very pleasantly surprised to see that is the case.
So let's dig a little bit more into maintaining social donor engagements and how to perfect that, or how to at least improve upon it. Again, bear with me just a minute while I get back to running the slides here. We need to change the approach. It can't be the same as for organic donors. And there are three main prongs. Active stewardship, and that means both gift stewardship and donor stewardship, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. Leveraging the relationships that got them involved in the first place, really taking advantage of those social relationships that brought them to your attention and got them to make a donation or volunteer or do whatever. And lastly, leverage the method or the activity that worked initially. What fundraising event or what interaction brought them to your attention? Come on. Active stewardship. So for social donors, most of this, or much of this, I don't want to say most, much of this is often not taking place. And Bailey mentioned before that for some social donors, only 25% of them are hearing from the organization that they donated to. Obviously, we don't think that's a good practice. So thank them, first and foremost. Thank them for their gift, for their participation, for their tribute, etc. And make it personal to the greatest extent possible and remind them of their own importance. Impact. Tell them about the impact of their gift, or of all the money raised at the event, or of all the money raised in the last quarter, or whatever. Let them know how their gift is directly affecting your mission. Get more info from them. Find out if they had a positive experience. Take an interest in them as supporters. Since so many social donors don't hear from the organizations that they give to, taking an interest in them, asking for their feedback, sending them a survey is going to make a difference. And stay in touch. Follow up with non-solicitation communications. Subscribe them to a newsletter. They'll let you know if they don't want to get it anymore. Send them stewardship information. Send them information about volunteer opportunities. Anything that you can do to continue the flow of communication. And as long as we're talking about active stewardship, I want to talk about gift stewardship versus donor stewardship. And you can think of them as being the tactical and the strategic sides of the same coin. Gift stewardship is more tactical. It is thanking a donor for a gift and providing them with information on impact. I would say that is the most important and the most immediate. Donor stewardship is more strategic. It is building the longer-term relationship with the donor and reminding them of how important they are to the organization overall. And both of those are important for ongoing engagement and for long-term relationships with these donors. The second prong in this three-prong approach is leveraging the relationship. You want to use that initial relationship, use that social relationship. That's the person that got them involved in the first place. You really want to leverage that relationship. You want to have that person help you remain connected with the donor. And that can be from a stewardship standpoint. They could be the conduit for sending messaging to the donor about how their money was used. And then that can also be from an ongoing re-engagement standpoint. I think we talked about three prongs. I think the second prong has to have its own two prongs. One is the social relationship that got the person involved in the first place and have messaging coming from them as well as from the organization officially. I also want to talk about the timing. Oh, damn this PowerPoint, sorry. For some peer-to-peer events, and even for events overall, some of them specifically appeal to contributions in honor of or in memory of. And for those, birthdays, anniversaries, special occasions, and memorials can be leveraged so that donors have the opportunity each year to honor an occasion or to memorialize someone important to them or to the person who engaged them initially. And so if you can focus your timing on leveraging those occasions, those events, and asking people to re-engage in conjunction with those, with that timing, that will support engagement overall. The last prong is leveraging the approach. And by this, we mean leveraging the method or the activity that worked initially, taking advantage of what got them involved in the first place. 54% of social donors said that they are likely to give again in the same way. So keep that in mind. More than half are most likely to give again in the same way. And the vast majority, almost 90% of first-time social donors, said they would be open to an additional donation request that came from the right person. So that is their already involved friend, family member, or colleague. So, and I'll review these prongs again toward the end of the presentation, but I think that that's kind of the meat of the strategy for re-engaging social donors and keeping them engaged. Bailey, I think it's time for the next poll.
It's poll time. That was really cheesy. I regret it immediately. Let's actually find out a little bit about people's engagement strategy for virtual peer-to-peer donors. And notice we've got virtual in parentheses because, again, this is it's a new shift. So we're curious to know, do you have a separate engagement strategy? So the choice would be yes, we do. Nope, we use the same strategy as the rest of our donor pool. Or we are not really currently engaging in a peer-to-peer specific engagement strategy. And as we're waiting for people to respond to this, it'll be interesting, Stu, to see what information is collected during this time that we'll be able to apply moving forward. Just there's been so many creative ways that nonprofits have done this, you know?
Yeah, I do. And as the poll is, as people are voting, and we've got right now 50% of the attendees have voted, we'll keep it open for another 15 seconds or so. I just want to thank people for their honesty, because we'll show the numbers in a minute, but the majority do not have a separate strategy, and so I just appreciate your candor in saying that, and hopefully some of the tips and tricks and strategies that we are sharing today will help you along those lines. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think we can close the poll right now.
All right. So yeah, it looks like we're pretty evenly spread, although the majority is around not having a peer-to-peer engagement strategy. But like Stu was just saying, I think this is probably a great opportunity to just be aware of it. It may not have been something that you thought about doing before. So now that we understand that there are different motivation, there's different motivation behind them, there's a different way to engage and re-engage, then hopefully you can apply some of these strategies to what we're doing moving forward.
All right, great. Can we talk about our favorite topic at OMatic?
It is our favorite topic at OMatic. I would love to. And that is the fact that with all of these strategies in place, with all of these best practice recommendations, your efforts are only going to be as good as your data. If you want to really effectively move forward, you first have to have this complete and timely data in order to analyze it. So it sounds like it might be a little bit daunting. It's not. You can actually make your data work for you. The first thing we often recommend to people is think about, where does all of this information live? Specifically with peer-to-peer and now virtual peer-to-peer events, there's a lot of different places that data can end up. You know, there are event systems, there are peer-to-peer systems, tributes, spreadsheets, online, offline. I mean, there are so many different moving pieces that contain information. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we, first of all, recognize all of these different data points, and then we centralize them. This data centralization is imperative to having a complete view of these donors, that 360-degree view that is so often heard about. The other thing, too, is when you're thinking about these different... We've heard tell, yes, there's been rumored to be. And, you know, the final thing to think about is if you are really doing your due diligence in making sure that you're looking in all of the different places you're tracking information, you don't know what you're going to find, right? You may find a longer history with an individual that you didn't even realize that it was being tracked in another system. Once you really have a good understanding, you can figure out how to strategize, how to leverage that information to, again, be more thoughtful with developing a relationship. So now it comes time to talk about this in an example that Stu and I absolutely love. So the example that we're going to give about data centralization and why it's so important is Stu and Bailey's annual awesome road trip. So Stu has a really, really good understanding of all of the geography of the United States and the West, being from Missouri. I'm pretty good about the East Coast because I live in South Carolina now. So we've got this really nice, intricate understanding of each of these different states by themselves. But if the goal of Stu and I's awesome road trip is to go from Miami, Florida to Seattle, Washington, our knowledge in pockets means nothing. It is not going to tell us any information because it's not working together. So, kind of put that in perspective, it has to really come together in order to be able to glean insight from it, to notice a trend, to basically figure out what is going to be the straightest path from A to B. Stu, I'll pick you up next week. I'll hop in the car.
Okay. I'm ready.
Okay, perfect. So data quality, again, is really what is going to drive results. So if you've got inaccurate or if you've got incomplete or outdated information, not only can your efforts be ineffective, they can even be damaging. And I'm sure that you've had experiences yourselves with getting a mailing with your name misspelled or getting 5 of the same mailings, right? Not only is it not as effective, but it can be frustrating because donors are left questioning what you are doing with their donations. So again, maintaining this database with current and standardized and really complete data, that's what is going to allow you as an organization to drive your engagement strategy forward. Something else to think about too, for those of you on the development side of things, the development team is more likely to use data if they can trust it. So, I mean, it's really their job to be able to create these relationships and cultivate these relationships and steward them. But if they don't feel like they can trust the information that is in your system or record, then they're not going to use it. And what they're doing then is they're limiting the way they can personalize these communications. And as we all know, the more personalized the communication, the more likely it is to lead to a donation and to be retained.
And that's so true, and it can also, that lack of trust can permeate the whole organization. I used to work for a very large hospital foundation, and there was a major gift officer that I worked with who didn't trust the data in the database, and so she kept her own shadow system, and that was the worst thing she could do. But if someone on the team doesn't trust the data, then it could permeate the entire organization, and the donors will feel that too.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think it's time for our last poll.
All right, so let's talk about reporting and analysis. So are you reporting on these peer-to-peer donors separately from other donors? The choices would be no, and I don't think we actually could. No, but the possibility is there, or yes, we are.
And again, I appreciate the honesty in these answers.
All right, so we'll give it another few seconds. And this really comes down to, these polls it's interesting to see what other organizations are doing, but I think it's really equipping us to just kind of take a step back and understand what is happening at our organization. We may know this is something that we should be doing, but by kind of filling this out and saying, actually, I'm not, I think it's just a nice sort of reminder. So Stu, what do you think? Are we ready?
We've got 59% voted. Let's give it another 10 seconds.
Okay. And while we're finishing that up, right before we close it, we are kind of rolling into the end of our presentation, and then we've saved some time at the end for questions that we can address. But definitely looking forward to hearing questions and feedback on this.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and close the poll. Obviously, we again appreciate your honesty. It's important from our standpoint. Our perspective is that there should be separate reporting so that you can use your data to leverage this specific segment of your donor population. So as we get ready to wrap up, bear with me just a minute. We will review some important takeaways. Social donors have a wealth of potential for future engagement, that's for sure. And if you can continue to retain them year over year, that 8% or that 6% every year over 10 years, that's 60% or 80% of new donors that you've retained, and that can really grow your roles of long-term engaged and loyal donors. Your strategies for retaining them should be appropriately different from organic donors based on how and why they were first engaged and by whom. Remember to steward them, leverage their social relationships, and leverage the event or the activity or the timing that prompted their initial engagement. And use what you have to create relationships that are ripe with opportunity. It could be a gold mine. You know their relationships, you know their motivation, you've collected data about them. You may find that some of these donors were involved with your organization in a different way, or maybe they volunteered. You've got all this data at your fingertips, and so we really strongly recommend that you leverage it, you use it to segment, you use it to figure out how to message to people. What you want to do is you want to send the right message using the right medium to the right donor at the right time, and you've got all the data that you need to do that. and before we go to questions, I just want to close with a story that is relevant. It's germane to this topic, and I wouldn't have put this in before I myself was involved in a virtual peer-to-peer event last weekend. Actually, not last weekend, the weekend before. It was the Easter weekend. I had never engaged in a virtual peer-to-peer event before, but I had an email. I got two emails from two different acquaintances of mine suggesting that I get involved in this. You know, we're all staying home on the weekends, and so there's not a lot to do. And so I was able to, I didn't do the live stream because of the time zone difference. I realized I live in Missouri, which is actually Central Time, and so the timing didn't work for me. But then I was able to watch it on YouTube immediately after. So I did that. It was an hour long. It was engaging. It was throughout the video, there were plenty of opportunities where the charity identified the website to go to so that you could make a gift if you wanted. And they were one team that was part of a larger group of teams that was raising money for this cause. And so after the video was over, I went to my laptop and I made a gift. I logged on, I made a gift. I got an immediate thank you. And I have not heard a word from anybody since, not from the organization and not from either of the people that engaged me initially. Now, I realize it's only been about 2 weeks, so we'll see what happens after that, but they are missing an opportunity for keeping me engaged in this charity as we speak. And nobody's got unlimited charitable contributions, and if someone who is more aligned with engaging with me comes along, in a few months and engages me more effectively, I may be more aligned with that organization down the road than with the event that I participated in 2 weeks ago.
Good real life example.
Yeah, good real life example. So, I haven't checked to see if there's any. Bailey, are there any other
We've
final
got a
remarks that you
lot
want
of
to add?
good questions. Yeah,
Oh,
no,
good.
I think I'm just looking at the questions. I think we've got a lot of good ones. So, what I'd like to do is just kind of let me go through them and I will paraphrase them, and Stu, you and I can kind of take a stab at answering them if that's okay.
That is great.
For those that are asking as well, as we're answering and addressing these questions, I just want to point out there is an info@omaticsoftware.com email address, and our website is there too. So if we're not able to get to your question, or if you'd like to discuss it further, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So first question is, we would like to collect more data, but we struggle with making registration for events or general donations easy and quick for people. How do you add in more questions without annoying your donors?
So that's a great question, and it's ironic because I'm totally unrelated from this, related to some total different thing. I took a SurveyMonkey tutorial. It was about a 10-minute video that I watched about the best way to do survey questions, and so I'll just pass on some knowledge that I learned from that. One is keep the number of questions limited to what someone can see on one screen. That's A. B, while they may not all, sometimes they have to be text questions, but text questions should not ever be the first question. The first question you ask should be something that can easily engage somebody with a checkbox or a yes or no or a radio button that they can easily answer, and that is not onerous for them. And then the other is keep the whole time, how long it takes to go through the form, and try to keep it a minute or less to fill out the form. Those were some tips and tricks that I could pass on that. However, I think it's important that you prioritize the data that you want to collect and make that, if you can't collect everything, identify what the most important data elements are and include that on your registration form.
Great. There's another question that came in that I can take a stab at, Stu, and the question is related to the fact that our marketing team often suppresses our peer-to-peer donors significantly. So how do we strike the balance on that? That's a great question, because again, the marketing team has their goals in mind, and they're going to want to market to the individuals that have made a donation directly or organically before. But I think that the way to have them not suppress them as much is just education, right? It's allowing them to see some of the statistics around these peer-to-peer donors, the fact that they do make up a non-minor part of the database, 6 to 8%. The fact that we've got this information, and now and timing is really kind of the best. This is the best time to engage them, to be able to gain a meaningful relationship from them. And just overall, again, being able to report on them separately. So if they're suppressing them, that means that they can engage them or they can identify them separately. So just being able to produce a different strategy and really educating the marketing team on the different motivation and the different ways to think about the relationship.
Thank you.
And that's why we'll be sharing these slides too.
One quick question that I can answer very quickly. When you say donors here, do you mean the peer-to-peer fundraisers or the people who sponsor our event participants? We are talking primarily about the sponsors, about the people who have not been engaged with the organization until the fundraiser taps them on the shoulder virtually and invites them to sponsor their walk, run, ride, team, whatever.
Stu, I'm gonna, this question is, I think, pretty this is a general question, I think, just important for everyone to know, but I'm gonna ask you to answer it just with your experience. And the question is just simply, when do you delete a donor from your database?
Oh, that's such a good question. So let's talk about let's reframe it and say, when do you delete a record from your database? So if you have if you've got someone that you've prospected who's not donating, and they are just taking up space, and they've been solicited and prospected and have not come across with a donation, I think it's safe to delete them after a reasonable amount of solicitations, and that's going to be different for every organization. But I think that it's safe to delete them after a period of working them. For a donor who has actually made a contribution, so I would say the conventional wisdom is 5 years. There is some research done that says if someone gave to your organization and hasn't given in 5 years, they are like a new donor. However, I am always reluctant about deleting any donor from a database entirely. I think a better practice is to code them in such a way that you can always go back to them, even not necessarily for soliciting, but even running them through NCOA every couple of years to make sure that you can still find them, or get a email or phone number appends, or even like date of birth appends, so that you can segment them based on age and maybe send some messaging that's more meaningful to people of a certain age. The other thing is, this is absolutely meant to be database agnostic, but certain more sophisticated database systems, and Bailey and I work with a lot of Razor's Edge customers in particular, there are ways to isolate non-donors or long-time donors and kind of separate them out so they don't clutter your database, but that you can still have access to them. And so if there's a way that you can partition these people and keep them separated so that you can apply a different strategy, I think that would be the best of all possible worlds.
Absolutely. Here's one that I can talk to. Do you have a suggestion for re-engaging social donors after some time lapsed, especially in the light of the current climate? And what I'd mention here is what Stu had talked to earlier in the presentation, which is thinking about the fact that there are really two ways to steward an individual. And one is stewarding the relationship, and the other is stewarding the donation. So what I would recommend, especially in this light where you want to remain engaged, but you want to be sensitive to what could be happening in their personal lives or in the economy, is really continue to focus on that stewarding of the relationship. Right? If you're continuing to reach out, if you're continuing to engage, but not necessarily always asking for something, it becomes more of a pure relationship. And when things do ease up and when people are ready to be able to help, they feel much more in tune with your organization and kind of have that connection with them. Stu, any comments on that?
No, I think you covered it. Can I go on to the next question, which is another one that's kind of near and dear to me?
Let's do it. Sure.
Someone asked, specific to tribute giving, what is an appropriate time to re-engage with an ask? So two answers to that question, which are not mutually exclusive. One is that tribute donors, so donors who give through tribute programs, giving in memory or in honor of, tend to enjoy making tribute gifts. Tribute giving is important to them, and they like being able to give in memory or in honor of individuals and occasions. And so they may be very responsive to appeals that are tribute specific. So that's one thing. And there's no time limit on that. That could be something we might say that you might solicit them with an opportunity to make another tribute gift even within 90 days. But another very effective way to engage people is on the anniversary of their original tribute gift, especially if it's for an occasion like a birthday or an anniversary. it's going to come around every year. And even tributes that are in memory of people on the anniversary of their death, that might be meaningful to the surviving spouse or the other or friends or other family members who originally wanted gifts to go to your charity in memory of their loved one in the first place. So I think those are both really viable and effective ways of re-engaging with tribute donors.
So, Stu, I know we're looking at the same sort of list of questions, and what I'd like to do is maybe combine the next two, because I think that they both kind of can play in conjunction with one another. So, to paraphrase, one is asking about examples of how to engage the donors. So, are we just asking the event participant to re-engage? Are we just saying, hey, become a participant? But then the other question or comment is basically asking, okay, but what about the individuals that are maybe team captains? So they are the relationship, they're the link to these individuals, and stepping on their toes, right? We don't want to I guess cross that bridge where we are going above and beyond what we should be doing and reaching out to them. And we've had this question before. So I'll kind of talk to it from one angle, and then Stu, if you want to take it from another one. But
Sure.
what we've found to be helpful is working with these individuals. So what I'm talking about now is, again, it could be a team captain, it could be the peer-to-peer lead, just based on whatever the event specifically is, engaging with those individuals. So having a plan, a communication plan where they are aware that you will be reaching out to them. They are given the opportunity to say, no, do not reach out to them. But it's creating a communication plan with those individuals that are sort of at the top of the pyramid below. Because that way you'll also find out some interesting ways that they can be engaged. Yes, sometimes people will get frustrated if you reach out when they are not aware. But sometimes people are they're enthusiastic about it, because again, this is something that is a passion for them. This is something that's important to them. So they truly do want the people that they've invited to engage to continue to do so, to continue to help your mission. So I would say that one place to start is just by having conversations or putting out surveys to the individuals that are the direct connection to your mission. Stu, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah. So I think education is imperative. I think that team captains or participants who are engaging sponsors, who are engaging donors, contributors, need to understand that it's a joint effort. That it's first, we're all in this together, and that it's a mutual benefit to communicate effectively, regardless of whether it comes from the social relationship person, the team captain, or the sponsored person, or from the organization. But if that's an issue, either in general or with certain of your fundraisers, then I think and this is labor intensive. I was going to say this is not unintensive from a labor standpoint. It takes some coordination, but it might be a good idea to meet with these people and to look at the list of donors and say, who do you want to talk to and who should the organization connect with? And do you want to reach out to these people in person, by phone, by email? What's the best way to connect with them? And what's the best way for us to connect with them? And really kind of divide and conquer. Relationships are all different. It is going to be different if the contributors are family members versus coworkers, and it's going to be different again depending on how they entice them to engage to begin with. So I would say a combination of education, expectation setting, and dividing and conquering are really good approaches.
Yep, I like that a lot. Okay, so this next question, the organization in question is sort of half peer-to-peer and half major gifts. So what is the opinion about soliciting peer-to-peer donors, most of them who are not necessarily giving to the organization, but are giving to the person who asked them, that direct connection, via direct mail, email solicitation, etc., or should they be left alone in order to not cause any issues with the peer-to-peer campaign?
So I think it is evolutionary. And I'll explain what I mean by that in just a minute. So no two organizations are going to be the same. No two events are going to be the same. No two volunteer fundraisers are going to be the same. But if you think of the conventional donor pyramid, if someone comes in at the bottom through a peer-to-peer event or even through a tribute, the most effective way to re-engage them and to retain them initially is through a similar solicitation through the person, somehow involving the person that originally, the social relationship, the person who originally enticed them, and a similar event or a similar activity or a similar way for them to remain engaged. So that would be for the second gift. The third gift might be, again, something similar. By the time they've given 2 or 3 times, by then I think they are, now they're yours more than they are the social relationships donor. And as their giving as you retain them as donors and as their giving becomes less sporadic and more consistent, then you can freely and appropriately, and I think with solid strategy, add them to your standard direct marketing roles. And you might even do some testing if your database is big enough on how those audiences respond to standard direct mail versus peer-to-peer solicitations only. I think that to Bailey's point toward the end of the slide presentation, you've got a lot of data. Please use it and see what's going to work best. But ultimately, I think that as a contributor's relationship with you evolves through ongoing giving, they become more responsive to conventional solicitation methods.
I'd absolutely agree with that. So we're kind of running short on time. I'm going to ask one more question just because I love this as kind of a final question before we hand this back to the Cathexis team. How do we balance having the right data and being proactive? So in other words, how do we not get stuck just basically being stagnant, not doing anything because we're unsure of the quality of our data? Do we wait and collect more and more? So when do we know to start moving forward based on our data? That's a great question, and I think Stu and I can probably both answer this in that there is really no perfect time. We get this question a lot: how much is enough data to start moving forward? And I think with this, it's just about building this platform, building this foundation, building these records up. So what I would do is first make sure that you have standardization rules in place. So I think that being consistent is probably going to be the most important thing. So if there's any question, what we would recommend probably is doing an audit, right? So maybe have a third party come in and take a look at your data, do some spot testing, make sure that they're looking through your different tables and the different ways that you're using different codes, for example, and just provide recommendations on how to start with a clean slate. So making sure that before we really kind of put the pedal to the metal and moving forward, we are all in an understanding of what is the way that we're all going to do this together. Stu, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything you say. In terms of just the real tactical, like what do you do if you're unsure about your data? I would never recommend sending a message, whether it's email, direct marketing, direct mail, telephone, face-to-face, any communication method if you are unsure of your data or if you think that data is incorrect. On the other hand, if you don't do anything, you're not going to raise any money. And so if you don't want to get into kind of an analysis paralysis situation. And so I would with care, not be reluctant to send out an appeal and raise some money and get some information back from the donors or even from the post office that will help you ameliorate the quality of your data.
Perfect. Well, guys, we are at time, so we're going to hand it back to the Cathexis team. But again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to continue these conversations, and hopefully you found this helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bailey and Stu. That was really great stuff. So we've reached the end of our time for this session, but we are having another session on stewardship for virtual peer-to-peer events. So that's going to start at 1 o'clock. And please note that if you're joining us for that session, you're going to need to log in using the link that you received via email when you registered. And with that, have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.